Hi, welcome everyone. This is Yehuda Shamroth from Ramat Beit Shemesh, Israel. Welcome to Redemption Thursdays with Rabbi Pinchas Winston, world-renowned Torah teacher, writer, and lecturer from Telstone, Israel. Visit his website and read and purchase one of his many books, articles, webinars, and videos, all on topics of Jewish history, especially Jewish history, redemption, final Geula, reincarnation, and all kinds of other Jewish topics. I'm posting his website right here, 36.org. Tonight's shiur is entitled Preparing for Redemption, based on one of Rabbi Winston's most recent books. I know he's got more, but the most recent one that I own is ETA, Estimated Time of Arrival of Mashiach. This is brought to you by the Miriam Project, israeltorah.org, and bringthemhome.org. Please enjoy the shiur. Thank you, Rabbi Winston, for joining.
Thank you. Okay. Last week I began with a sefer that I find to be, it's a very important sefer with a lot of important fundamentals and concepts that some I already was aware of, but not to such a full extent. It's based upon the teachings of the Vilna Gaon and also the Ramchal, which is Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, two very important Kabbalists. Rabbi Luzzatto lived in the 1700s. And the Gra also lived towards the end of the 1700s, or began and died, I think, since 1780. But the work remains eternal because it's based upon eternal material, the Zohar, and a lot of concepts that is really crucial to know in order to understand, history, to put things in perspective, especially as we get to the end of days, which we are in, because it's so late in history, just by virtue of that alone. A person would say, 6,000, even if you, first of all, not everyone realizes that 6,000 years Gemara says. And even people who've been learning for a long time will tell you, the Gemara says 6,000. Who says it is exactly 6,000? Maybe it's 7,000. Maybe it's just an exaggeration. And I think the Rambam didn't hold exactly the 6,000, but then again, according to the Rizal, he did learn Kabbalah. So, and really, that's really the point, because it's like life. If you don't know the DNA of a person, they look like just anybody else, and perhaps they could live to 60, 70, 80 years, but a lot of times our death is encoded to a large degree in our physical being. Certain illnesses, God forbid, or weaknesses or that we have that we're born with can dictate just how long we live. And certainly spiritually that's the case. The soul is a certain time in this world, and God decides exactly. We know that, and it may come as a surprise to us, but it's all predestined for the most part. History is the same way. That it's got its own genetic code, spiritually speaking, based upon what we call this. Our topic in the basic color, partsufim, spheres. In short, the spheres are the spiritual mechanism, spiritual, not physical at all. The mechanism that God created to take His light, which at its source is too intense for creation to exist, let alone have free will, and filter it down level by level that we can have creation and different levels of consciousness to make possible free will and moral choice and things like that. And history has been unfolding for the last 5,783 years. And these spheres basically are a potential. And even though there's 10 of them, 3 of them are really relevant only to the world to come. Those are the first 3. They're very spiritual, super spiritual, beyond our comprehension spiritual. And the last one, the Malchus, is a story unto itself. And it really corresponds to the first 1,000 years of the world to come, from 6,000 to 7,000, which we haven't gotten to yet, getting very close. But the six spheres, which in Hebrew are Chesed, Gevur, Tiferes, Netzach, Chod, Yesod, which translated is kindness and strength and beauty and dominance or eternity, and Hod is glory, and Yesod is foundation. They correspond to different characters in Hebrew, in history, Jewish history. Chesed is Avraham, Gevur is Yitzchak, Tiferes is Yaakov, and Netzach is Moshe Rabbeinu, Hod is Aaron HaKohen, and Yesod corresponds to Yosef. And it's not just a thing. It's a potential. These are, each of the spheres have a specific type of light that gives rise to what occurs in the corresponding millenniums. So the first 1,000 years corresponds to the sphere of Chesed. And that light was the basis of all that existed and all that happened in the 1,000 years. And the Gevura, which is strength, which is a source of judgment and even evil if you go far enough down the road, right? That was the reason why the flood took place in the second millennium and not the first millennium, because the first millennium was chesed, kindness, so God overlooked the sins of mankind to a large degree. But in the second millennium, where there's judgment, when the flood took place. The third millennium corresponds to Tifer, which is also talked about in terms of Torah. The Torah was given in the third millennium, the fourth, etc. And we're in the sixth millennium, which corresponds to the sphere of Yesod and Yosef Tzaddik. And it's the basis of exile at this time and the redemption that comes at the end. And if you know these things, it's like technology, it's like a computer. If you understand what's going on under the hood, or a car for that matter, you understand how the motor works, how the engine works. You can just listen to it and know which part is not functioning properly, or if it's all going well. And you can fix things. You can tinker with things and tamper with things. That's the beauty of learning Kabbalah. We don't have much of a direct connection as we once did through Kabbalah. Most of it's just intellectual, just knowledge. But we also have more power, so to speak, than we know. I mean, not as much as it used to be, but much more than people think. I mean, people daven, they pray to Hashem, Shachris, Mincha, Mariv, on a daily basis, on a Shabbos. It's more of an obligation. Am I making a difference? Am I having an effect? So people say Tehillim. They have these Tehillim groups and things like that to try to affect the situation, and you have to wonder, how much does it really, alter the outcome? And the answer is a lot. It depends upon your intention. But we have these powers that God gave to us, not superpowers. It can't fly yet. One day we will, but not right now, except by airplane. And we have much more at our fingertips to affect our own personal destinies and the destiny of the world, if you know how to work with it. And that's what Kabbalah does. It enables you. It's like taking a training course to fix watches or to fix a computer. Once you learn that information, then you can you have to run to a shop every time to fix things. You could open it up, you recognize what's going on, and you can make adjustments. Likewise, the same thing is true of Torah in general, but Kabbalah specifically. And these are fundamentals. These are ideas that they don't necessarily empower. Well, they can. They can't empower you to affect the outcome. Like we just had an election in Israel right now, and we didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And obviously, there's a big divergence in this country between the left and the liberals, and you have the more conservative, the Orthodox Jews and more conservative elements, and they're opposites completely. We just came off of a left government that obviously the right did not approve of, and when the right's in government, the left doesn't approve of it. And we're living very liberal times. And you see what's gone on in the United States of America, the direction the politics have gone, and other countries too, for that matter. Historically, it always happens this way. We always start off after a major war very conservative because people learn to appreciate the value of life more. Their priorities are different. But as time goes on and we enjoy the peace and technology, and we start to become more relaxed and more liberal. And if you take God out of the equation, so that liberalness can actually end up being, leading to immorality because of the fact that, without God, without that big parent in the sky, so to speak, to watch over us and to guide our actions, we don't have that level of self-discipline and conscience to be able to make sure everything we're doing is morally correct. People don't believe in morality anymore. It's more just a question of opinion of how you want to live. Because if without God, there's no objective truth. Without any objective truth, everything's just an opinion. So who's to say my opinion is better than yours? I can say I don't like your opinion. You can say I don't like my opinion, and we can choose to live in different parts of the world. But it becomes very hard to say right and wrong anymore, right? Someone has to understand that if they don't believe in God and they don't believe in Torah from Mount Sinai, they don't believe in objective truth. They can't say that the Holocaust was evil. They can't say that Hitler was evil. They can say, I don't like it. They can say, I don't approve of it. But that was his opinion. And that's what he did. And you have your opinion. That's what you do. But in order to be able to qualify a choice, you have to be able to compare it to something else that's objectively true. And the only thing that we have that's like that is God's opinion, and that's what the Torah is supposed to be. But the main point is that if you understand how things work, how creation works, the nuts and bolts of history, then it's very empowering in as much as it, A, allows you to more correctly interpret the events of your day, which is what we're trying to do, and B, that it allows you to appreciate how what you do can impact the results of something. For all we know, that the fact that things worked out more, we don't know where things are going to go ultimately. Things change dramatically. I'm not saying this is like clearly, exactly what has to happen, but it does for the time being. It's certainly more suitable to us, and there was much better turnout in the religious sector to vote, and there's a lot of tefillah, a lot of tehillim, a lot of things were done, a lot of mitzvahs were done in order to try to affect the outcome of the election. Did it help to make a difference? Well, we can't see the direct connection, but if you understand how things work, there's no reason to assume it didn't, even this day and age. So late in history, so far from Mount Sinai, without prophets and things like that, that we still make a huge impact. And understanding how that is and how that works, that's what empowers you, because it changes the way you pray. If you know that your prayer makes a difference, if you know that the way you pray and how much you put yourself into it, that it connects you to Hashem, and that connection is what can affect the outcome of an event or what's going on in your life, then you'll put the energy into it. But if you don't believe it, if you think it's a technical thing, you punch your card, you go and you come out, 2 minutes later, then you're right. That type of tefillah is not going to have an impact on the situation. But not because it can't, because you're not using it that way. It's like getting into a car because you want to go somewhere, but never turn the ignition on. Sitting in the car, go, okay, today you have automatic cars, but without that, it's like, you sit there in the garage. And after 20 minutes, I guess we're not going anywhere right now, so you go back in the house. But not because the car couldn't drive, because you failed to turn the ignition on and go someplace. So that's what tefillah is. That's what it represents. That it's like turning the key. And these concepts, these ideas, these are game changers. This is what changes the whole perspective, the understanding. So last week we spoke about a Pekid and Zechira. And I'm not going to go through all the information all over again, but that's a very important point. It's an extremely important point. And not only is it important going forward, it's also important looking back. For the longest time, I learned in Cheder and early years that there was the exile in Babylonia. The Jewish people lost the temple and were exiled to Babylonia. And I never heard about Koresh that much, and about the fact that it was many years later when I heard that Koresh, after conquering Medai, Persia took over. So after 52 years into the exile, from the time that they were exiled from Eretz Israel, that he opened the door to go back and build the Beis Hamikdash. And only 42,000 Jews went. And it was a failure. After that, according to the Kabbalah, Kosh Baruch Hu closed the door because there was such a poor response. Koresh was supposed to act in a messianic way. He was a non-Jewish ruler. He was not, the Gemara says, he wasn't Mashiach. He couldn't be Mashiach because he was a Gentile. But he acted in a messianic way by opening the door for Jews to go back, 18 years earlier than they did. And had they gone back en masse to build the Beis Hamikdash, we wouldn't have gone the other 18 years until the time of Achashverosh and Haman and all the tsuras we went through there. And when we required, a spectacular redemption, more miraculous than back at the time of Koresh, although it was quite miraculous. That Koresh did that anyhow, that he allowed us to do that. But even more miraculous when we had to defeat Haman in 70 days from the time he rose to power. And of course, Purim celebrates that redemption. And even after that, we didn't go back on as fast as we should have, as much as we should. And because of that, the redemption from Babylonian also wasn't complete, leading eventually to the Greek exile and finally the Roman exile that we're hopefully finishing up, probably already did finish up, as of World War II. But this is this idea of Koresh, as the Gra explains, that's called the Pekida. That was stage one. Now, from the outside, it looked like it could have been the redemption. That's true. and then it wasn't the redemption, and then the door shut, and that was it. So it looks as if it was a failure. The same thing is true in 1948. There are a lot of people who believed that you go back at the time today. It's very hard to feel today what they felt back then. Given what the state looked like and the situation coming from the Holocaust in Europe and hundreds of years of moving around from place to place like that, and to get back the land of Eretz Israel was absolutely, is unheard of. How many nations go thousands of years away from their land, hold on to the dream of getting back there and actually fulfill their lifetime? Yes, we had to go to war against 8 Arab nations to maintain our hold in the land, and we did. We succeeded also miraculously at that time. And people invested a lot of hope that this was it. This was the final redemption. This is all going to work now. We're all going to see Mashiach come and all the way we imagined and dreamed it, the prophets spoke about back in earlier times. It didn't happen. It was an existential war, and another one back in the 50s. So it was kind of one after the other, crisis after crisis. Now, things got better. We drained the swamps. We began to build cities. I mean, look at the infrastructure today. It's absolutely mind-boggling what we've accomplished in under 80 years. Absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, you can see the construction workers. You can see things happening, going, But if you stand back and say, yeah, but what were the conditions that allowed this to happen? A country, that didn't have the natural resources that other successful countries had, having to fight your enemies at the same time to survive while trying to thrive economically, socially, right? And yet we were able to do it. The Gra calls that, he calls it the ruach of Mashiach ben Yosef, because Mashiach ben Yosef is this force that allows things to happen. That's just like a balance between natural and miracle. That if you want to see it as a miracle, you can. You can say that's already kind of like miraculous. But if you want to see it as nature, you also can, because between the two. It's not like an overt, obvious miracle like splitting the sea, or God talking Mount Sinai, or doing the 10 plagues in Mitzrayim. Those are miracles that even Paro had to admit to. By the third plague, the Chartumim, the magicians, the sorcerers, they were admitting to the finger of God in all of this. So, that's overt. But what's been going on in the last 80 years is also miraculous, but more covert in the end. That's like Mashiach ben Yosef type of a koyach, the Gra explains. But again, it looked like, could have been, but wasn't, because the Jewish people didn't come back en masse, as people had maybe perhaps had hoped. It was very hard to leave the comfort of America, Canada, England, things like that, even though there might have been difficulties there. But look what we're working with a land that's underdeveloped, and people are dying from malaria, and enemies breathing down our neck every single day of the week. It wasn't inviting enough. So did it die? Was it a failure? No. That's what the Gra comes to say. He comes to say, and really the Ramchal, they're both saying the same thing, that's called the Pekida. Anything that happens, small, big, that seems to work in the direction of redemption. And even though there are some people who would like to believe and say that getting back to land was a Maisasat, and it's not redemption, it's going deeper into exile. Won't go into that right now. Because the tzura, the form of the land, there's no question about it. Getting the land back into Jewish hands, even if it's secular Jewish hands, because as we learned also from Kabbalah, other principles I brought up in the past, the Gemara speaks about some of them, and that is that God works in very mysterious ways. When we merit to bring the redemption in a straightforward manner, so then it's all logical. Mashiach comes, the nations go, oh, you're the Jewish people, God gave you the land, 100%, take it. It's where you belong. Can we help you? It's nice. That would be fantastic. But look at the Jewish people. 12, 13 million Jews in the world today. How many keep Torah mitzvahs? And how many keep Torah mitzvahs properly? Not enough to warrant that type of redemption, which the Gra is coming from the right side. So when it comes from the left side, from the side of din and judgment, then it has to happen in a more natural way. That's why the UN vote was people, a bunch of non-Jews got together and made a decision about the Jewish people in the land of Israel. What do we care? We're the Jewish people. That might have been true if we merited the redemption through the proper channels, but we didn't. So he says, if we're not zoich, if we're not merit worthy to have the land given to us and everybody understand, or just go back, the massive tshuva movements with the Jewish people, and we just gravitate back to the land that we're supposed to, and everyone's got the right perspective, and heresy is gone from the world. So then it has to happen through institutions like the UN. It has to, halachically, hashkafically, because it's coming more of a Mashiach ben Yosef type way, more from the left, more from a din, more tevedik type of way. And that was like Koresh. Koresh in his time was the UN, so to speak. And it was his permission that allowed the Jewish people to come back there to Israel at that time. Likewise, the UN in 1948, when they voted to give us, that we can keep the land and make a home there, right? Even though it's like God gave it to us, but that's God working through the UN, especially if you understand Hashgacha Pratis, the divine providence that was involved to put Harry Truman into office, that he would, bend arms behind people's backs to make them vote, because without him, seemingly, without him, the UN would not have voted in favor of the state of Israel being born at that time. So the Gra says that a Pekida is something that will happen for the sake of Gula. It clearly is leading that direction, and then the door shuts. It looks like nothing. It looks like it failed, but it didn't fail. That's all that was supposed to happen at that time. That's all that could happen at that time, and it happened. It fixed something. It did something. It righted something. Same thing by Noach in the Teva, right? It says that God remembered Noach, but that wasn't into the flood. The water stopped raining, the water stopped surging, but he still had to wait, and send the dove out and find dry land until it says, that he was finally redeemed from the Teva. 2 stages. First is the Pekida, and then there's a Chira. They both mean remember, but they refer to different levels of revelation of God and what he's doing to bring history to where it has to go. So in a sense, the election this week, right, it's kind of like a Pekida. That's what it looks like. I'm not saying for sure. I don't know that much, of what's going on. God hasn't revealed to us, but it would seem that it's kind of a fixing up from a Torah perspective. I understand. If you're secular and you don't believe in God and you don't believe in Torah, the religious right looks like they are fanatics. I mean, they just love using the word ultra-Orthodox, ultra. It's not ultra. It's what the Torah says you're supposed to do. They're ultra-secular. If you want to use the word ultra at all, they are extremely secular, but they think that's the norm because they don't believe in God, or if they do believe in God, they don't believe in Torah from Mount Sinai. So from that perspective, it's not even evil. It's just misguided. It's people who think that they understand what the world's all about, and from that perspective, this looks extreme. But assuming that God exists, and we can certainly show you why, and assuming the Torah came from Mount Sinai, and we can certainly show you why, if a person cares to find out, and those who have come to say, oh, look at that. It's actually true. It makes a lot of sense now. And then it flips your perspective over, and all of a sudden, what the Torah says you're supposed to do, that is what world history is all about. And the truth is, if you just look at world history, even from a non-religious perspective, you see that there's always this pattern going on where as what's going on today is, it's not the first time it's happened. All the the change of lifestyle and change of mentality and things that the Torah does not accept at all, right? It's not new. It's happened before. But every time it happened, there was some major correction to the device in history. And the truth is, the Torah, the Gemara itself, it says that every 60, 70 years that God brings some major disaster just to get rid of elements within creation that he doesn't want to exist. But he can't just focus on them because that would be too obvious. So therefore, other people die at the same time as well. It's all just. It's all worked out. But if in fact this was another Pekida, right? It would explain why, against the logic, against the current momentum, even in this country, that the left should be so heavily hit. Might be, it doesn't fix things up completely. We're not out of the woods yet. We have not solved all that. Government hasn't even taken office yet, and we still don't know the final formation and what type of backroom deals have to be made and compromises that we don't know. There's always surprises until the end. But if it turns out that this is working more in the direction of Geula, even still, it's quite far away, but somehow it allows a little bit more of that to come into the picture. It's called the Pekida. The Zechira, the Gra said, that you have to understand, that's the final redemption. That's when God pulls up the curtain and reveals it, and no one who survives will be able to deny the reality of God and the validity of Torah anymore, because all that confusion will disappear. That's the Zechira. So again, two stages of Geula. There is going to be Pekida, when God decides it's time to get things moving towards the redemption, first in Egypt, right? Moshe goes down to Egypt. God sends him down and says, tell Paro, let my people go. Moshe goes down. He talks to the nation. He gets their hopes up. He talks to Paro, and Paro says nothing doing, and he increases the slavery instead. He makes it worse. And then even Moshe comes back to God and says, why did you send me? Ever since you sent me down here, it just got worse. And God doesn't have Rahmanas, doesn't say, I understand where you're coming from. He says, what are you talking about? This is redemption for a variety of reasons. But what you did was a Pekida. And now the Zechira is going to come in Parshas Ve'era. In Parshas Shmos, that was the Pekida going down and all that. But now in Ve'era, with the plagues, as God reveals himself more and more, Paro asks the question, Mi Hashem. By the end, he understands exactly who Hashem is. What does he mean by Mi Hashem? Rashi points out he believes in God. But he believes in God who works b'derech teva, through nature. So therefore, naturally speaking, we're the stronger army. You don't have an army. We're going to be the ones in power. And Moshe said, there's this Hashem runs the Zechira. The Pekida can come through Elohim, but the Zechira, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. That means God is going to reveal himself in an overt way, and you have no questions, no doubts left on the table anymore after that. And Paro says, you're right, 100%. And God has to harden his heart to make him go chase after the Jews so they can finally deal with the Egyptian army completely once and for all by the sea. But Pekida Zechira. And you just find this, and it works, by the way, in personal life as well, not just in the nation's history, but also in terms of personal life, meaning that you could also have a situation in your own personal life where you need a Zechira, you need a Geula, financially, could be family-wise, business-wise. You need a Geula. A Geula is just a redemption from your situation, which seems like an exile of some sort. And something can happen that gets things going and then just fizzles out. You say, I thought that was going to be my savior. And the end is, no, but that was the first stage. It gets things moving. And he says very clearly, he's going to explain some more right now, read some more, that it will appear to us as if things are moving backwards. I mean, the Vilna Gaon says specifically, by the time when it comes to Pekida, Zechira, all these things like that, even if it looks like we're going backwards, it's still going forward. And he's going to explain why. And he says the following thing. It says in the Sefer called Tikuni Zohar Chadash, section of the Zohar, V'chein hirolo l'Noach b'remes al achvis hayamin kedei. So God showed Noah hints to, we talk about the Teva, Pekin Zechira. There's also hints to exiles coming up. There's a lot of midrashim that talk about the flood and Noah's actions, what happened to him. So he says that God showed him actually things to do with our time, end of days, back at the time of the Teva, right? In order that Noah should pray for Mashiach, that he should not die in battle, die in the process, because it's coming from the side of small. So what does that mean? Okay, so the Gemara says in Sukkah that we know there's two Mashiachs, Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. And Mashiach ben Yosef, he comes before Mashiach ben David to pave the way. The Shem Shmuel is a very nice explanation as to why there are two Mashiachs and why Mashiach ben Yosef versus Mashiach ben David. He says, I believe in Parshas Yishlach, so Yosef is compared to an ox, and Mashiach and David Amelech, Mashiach ben David is compared to a chamor, a donkey. The positive side, like Yisachar, because it's a beast of burden, and also represents humility to a large degree, even though it also represents the idea of gashmius, of materialism, which is why it symbolizes Egypt as well. But there's two aspects to both the shore, which is an ox, which because Esav also is compared to it as an ox, but in a negative way. So he says that the whole point of a shore is to pull the plow and break the hard ground, so you can plant, so you can seed the ground. But the way it is right now, you can't get into the ground. So you bring these big huge plows that the shore used to pull because he's strong like an ox, and it would break the ground, and you put the seed in. So he says that's what Mashiach ben Yosef does. Mashiach ben Yosef's tafkid is to break the Jewish people, meaning to soften us up, to make us rui, to make us like open to the idea of redemption. Because after years of exile and assimilation and intermarriage and all these things, and after years of talking about Mashiach and not seeing him come, let's face it, we've become hardened. Yechezkel calls it a heart of stone that has to become a heart of flesh. That's Mashiach ben Yosef's job, to help transform the heart of stone back to the heart of flesh. It might be events. It might be a world war. It might be what's happened in Eretz Yisrael. It might be politics. It might be a number of things, a combination of things. But the net result is going to be some type of transformation in us to make us more open to the reality of Mashiach. Primarily, in terms of our attachment to materialism, to make us reconsider our priorities and make materialism less of an issue in our lives, because that's one of the major obstacles people have to redemption. As long as we have lots of it, we don't need Mashiach. The moment is taken away, and all of a sudden we're crying out, please save us, God. So that's Mashiach ben Yosef. So he explains, the Shem Mishmul, that even though that we've been softened up by what's gone on, the entire time, nonetheless, it's still possible to have things like gaiva, have like arrogance, and to have pride, and some people just can't accept, like that's one of the reasons why the Jewish people didn't want to leave. The 4/5 that died in the plague of darkness, 80% of the Jewish people at that time, 12 million Jews died in the plague of darkness. Why, says the Medrash? Because in Mitzrayim they had positions of power, and they had covered from the rest of the nation because of who they were. Not everybody, I guess, but a lot of them. And they could not imagine giving that up. So they chose to stay in Egypt instead of leaving. And God said, well, that's not part of the program. And as a result of that, they died in Makas Choshev. But it's a problem for a lot of people to give up. In America, in Canada, they have positions, good jobs, and they have respect in the community and things like that. It's very hard to walk away from things like that. So even though we might become less materialistic, less attached to materialism, nonetheless, there's still ego to deal with. So that's Mashiach ben David's job. He comes to make, to soften that, to lower that, that we can become more prepared to serve God the way we're supposed to. That's why he explains 1-2 punch. But every time there's a Pekid, there's Mashiach ben Yosef, and then Mashiach ben David, he comes to finish off the job, which is what we've been waiting for the longest time. And you don't hear much about Mashiach ben Yosef at all, because Kabbalistically, we believe in the Sitra Achra, the forces that are anti-redemption. They don't mind if you talk about Mashiach ben David, because you can't get to him without going through Mashiach ben Yosef. So therefore, they keep Mashiach ben Yosef under wraps. It's like someone bragging they have the key to the executive kitchen, but they don't have the key to the front of the office. So they can't get in. A lot of good the key's going to do you to the executive kitchen if you can't get to the building itself. So likewise, without Mashiach ben Yosef, you really can't get to Mashiach ben David. So therefore, the Sitra Achra does whatever he can to interfere with our connecting and understanding of Mashiach ben Yosef. But the Gemara says that it's a potential for Mashiach ben Yosef to die in battle. But the Ramchal and the Gra both say it doesn't have to be that way. That will depend upon us, how much we are prepared and contribute to the Gula process. If we do our best to facilitate that, and that's what we've been doing. The Gra began Kibbutz Galios, the ingathering of exiles in the end of the 1700s, early 1800s, and it's been going on ever since. Waves of Aliyah. Here we are today, half the world's Jewish population living in Eretz Israel. An amazing thing, and they're still coming. Hopefully faster than the ones that are leaving. But it's not a natural thing from a historic point of view. There's no other nation that's done this type of a thing and still doing it, and all the history and all the war. It's just not a natural thing. This is what began back then. That, the Gra says, is one of the Mashiach ben Yosef tendencies. That's what you get involved in that, and you're acting like Mashiach ben Yosef to some degree. Another aspect, rebuilding the Yishuv Eretz Israel, building up the cities, building up the country. Unbelievable. Look at this. Today is like, everywhere you go, there's like construction going on, city after city after city, and the highways, and we rebuilt it. The last level of Mashiach ben Yosef, he says, is getting rid of Amalek, which he says basically was uprooting the Yetzer Hara from our hearts, which confuses us and causes us to do things we shouldn't do and go the wrong priorities. And that's a big one. That's a hard one for all of us to do. That's what Torah is for. We're given Torah mitzvahs and Musar and all these things to work on ourselves to try to be able to overcome the Yetzer Hara, that we can do what God wants us to do and be our real selves. Because most of what we are layers that the Yetzer is put upon us in order to please other people and to fit into society and get lost along the way. So we won't even recognize ourselves if we happen to live into Yemot HaMashiach when the Yetzer Hara will be gone. To see what we look like in essence, we'll be very surprised. But anyhow, the point is that Mashiach ben Yosef can die in battle, but he comes back to life later on, the Gemara says, because Mashiach ben David, after he wins the war and gets rid of Gog and Magog and all that, he resuscitates, brings back to life Mashiach ben Yosef. But nevertheless, the whole concept of the dying of Mashiach ben Yosef represents this idea of what looks like going backwards instead of forwards. And the Gra says very explicitly, you have to understand, it's never going backwards as much as it looks that way. So he goes on to say, right, that Rasidan Hayu Yisrael Shalo Yitzu Min Galus El Echad Meir V'Shnayim Mishpacha B'Tzad Gvura Shudim Yachsor V'Olam B'Tovo. So Gemara also says that at the end of days, that only one person from a city will survive, and two people from a family will survive. Why? Because the Gula comes on the side of Gvura and Din. There's going to be a big reckoning. Who merits to survive into the Messianic era? It's not an automatic thing. And Noach is supposed to daven for that shouldn't happen. The Mashiach ben Yosef shouldn't die in battle, meaning that we should have to suffer like this. He didn't. However, right, but Moshe did later on. There's a whole connection between Noach and Moshe, according to Kabbalah and reincarnation and all that. But Moshe himself davened instead, small nidchis v'lo yitzeh b'Yisrael, that the left should get pushed off, meaning that the side of judgment and din and has to repent in the height of God's face that leads to all the wars and things like that should get pushed off. Yamin mikarev v'shehi yamin mater klapi chesed. Instead of the right, which is chesed and rachamim, things like that should be more in control of the situation and therefore to mitigate the final redemption. So on one hand, it's talking about the war of Gog and Magog. The earth is going to shake, and the fish in the sea are going to shake, and major war. And then you see other things that talk about the war basically ending up getting rid of all the bad guys, but all the good guys are safe, and everything works out the way it's supposed to work out. Contradicting viewpoints and descriptions of what to expect, but they're not necessarily contradictory. It's just basically could be describing different scenarios based upon where the Jewish people are holding at that time and what we're doing and how much we anticipate redemption. Because we can't forget the Gemara that says that one of the 6 things they ask you on your day of judgment after you're gone from this world, Tzipis Yeshua, did you anticipate the redemption? 6 things. They ask you, they can ask you 1,000, but they ask you 6 specific things, and one of which is Tzipis Yeshua, did you anticipate the redemption? That's a major factor. It doesn't make a difference how financially successful you are. It doesn't make a difference whether you've got all the cover in the world and you're the happiest person in the world and you've got children and grandchildren, great grandchildren. It's like your life is so ideal and you thank Hashem every day for it. But you still have to anticipate redemption because you have to realize the entire time that the Jewish people, the Torah, is not running the world, let alone Eretz Israel, right? And there's no Beis Hamikdash, and the Shekhinah does not have its permanent home on earth, and we're not all connected. And as long as there's atheism, the Shekhinah is miserable. The Zohar says we might be happy, but the Shekhinah itself is miserable, and we're missing the point. So therefore, we have to say, yes, I'm having a wonderful life, but without the Shekhinah and the Beis Hamikdash and the world acknowledging that God is one, how can I be completely happy? And the Gemara seems to say we should be happy at all because of that. So, you have to be anticipating redemption, but it's not just that for your personal judgment, but that itself, that desire for redemption and the rectification of creation, that helps mitigate the end result. How major a war, if a war has to take place at all, and whether Mashiach ben Yosef, whoever that might be, if it's a person, you're conceptual, whether he has to die in battle, whether there has to be that kind of suffering. So he says, Bir Hagra Sham, the Gra explains there, he says, V'hachi achzei, and the pasuk of Mashiach Harishon, Shu Mashiach ben Yosef, B'chor Sharo, and he said to the smoky duke, he's talking about that, right? The Yamin Mekarev, the right hand should come close, push off the left, and bring the right. B'rachamim, as it says in Yeshaya, the pasuk in Yeshaya, Isaiah, right? It says, B'rachamim Gedon Ekapetzacha, that with great rachamim I will gather you in, Shivkom B'sitta the Yamina, right? That you will be redeemed from the right side. So, we don't have to go through terrible stuff. It's not an absolute, right? But if we don't get it right, so at least at the beginning of the Gula, it comes from the left side. It comes from the side of judgment. Small tachas lo based on pasuk shirim. My left hand, or his left hand, is under my head. Right? There's a big pasuk in Kabbalah. Right? So he says that in the beginning, exactly what we said, that it will happen in a very natural way, just like in Korsh's time. It'll seem like it was the UN voting and they agreed, even though they go back on it later on, and there's nothing but resolution after resolution against Israel. Since that time, the Brisker Rav said the only reason why the UN came into existence was for that one vote. After that, they became superfluous, and they haven't, given history and how they run things. What are we talking about anyhow? What are you talking about? We're trying to please people. We're trying to get them to agree to our existence and how we're living our lives and how we live in the land. But who are we dealing with? We're not dealing with God-fearing people. We're not dealing with people who understand what God meant when he made creation. That they're not saying, look, in your own Torah it says the following thing, you're not doing that. They're not saying that. They're saying, in our opinion, from our perspective, the way we live our lives and want to live our lives based upon secular lifestyle, this is what we think. This is what we want. This is what works for us. And they might even be anti-Semitic in the whole process, because that's all over the world. So, we're supposed to please people like that. Well, in the meantime, we have to work with them, because that's all part of the redemption process. But you have to stay focused. As the expression goes, a friend of my enemy is my enemy. Meaning that, who are we dealing with? And who are we trying to please? The bottom line is that we've had a Pekida. Clearly, we've had a Pekida. And as he's going to explain, we've gone through the Tzuras, and we're still going through the Tzuras that are part of Cheved Mashiach. You can't give up hope, and you can't get distracted, and you can't, be convinced and capitulate to things that are not sanctioned by Torah, just to fit in, just to go with the flow. You can't do that. We're so close to the end. God's choosing. Well, actually, there's we're choosing. He's giving us the opportunity to choose what we should believe in and where we're going with it. We've spoken about 1990 and the Tree of Knowledge, Good and Evil, and the Internet, and all these different factors. In the book ETA, I lay it all out. I just can't keep going through it every single time. It's just too much information to repeat. But it's all there, the timelines. If you have the Mizger, you have the framework, you understand what we're dealing with, and the historical evidence to show that this is what's really going on, it becomes clear. And it becomes much easier to be able to get your priorities straight at this very, very important period of history. Okay. Have a wonderful Shabbos, Besoros Tovos, and B'ezras Hashem, we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Winston. Have a wonderful Shabbos, and have a great Shabbos, everyone else. We'll see you next week, God willing.